Can he be a pug? Hello and welcome everybody. Chat's already going a little bit mad. There have been requests for a farmer named Uwe who cannot feed his workers, and a squirrel riding a pug with a shotgun. And Legion, no, I think it would be cheating if I used the same trick every time and put a painting in. I might also put a painting in, but I can't make it the same thing all of the time. I'm already flummoxed and we're only just starting. For anyone that's new here, real-time storytelling is when I create a story using prompts from chat live in front of you. If you're not interested in the discussion where we start to work out what nightmares are being given to me to put into the story, about a day or so after this streams, bookmarks will appear, but it takes YouTube that long to process it. So if it's after that point, just look into the description or along the bar and there'll be a bookmark that can take you straight to the story. That said, let's get into the bits and pieces of it and work out what we're going to do today. Besides the bits I've had so far, any thoughts, guys, on how and where we take the story this week? I'm hoping our response time will be a bit more rapid. I changed some of the settings, so the quality might drop a bit, but the speed between you typing, me seeing, should all be a bit faster. He says to nothing appearing on the screen. But yes, I'll work on Uwe, that's easy. Okay, that's an interesting start then. That certainly gives me something to work with. We have a couple buy a house in the countryside while renovating. The floor they find. Let's see, I've seen other people do this. Can I? I've got options. No, I haven't. I was hoping I could work out how people manage to suddenly bring this up on the screen, but I can't. I'll have to look at that for next time. So, a couple buy a house in the countryside. While renovating the floor, they find a well that, when explored, reveals a cavern. Now, that's something certainly a chunk to start off with, and that gives us a new storyline to run off rather than Fishman in a barrel. Do we have anything else? Any further parts? Equally, chat, you can put things in as I go along. In fact, please put things in as I go along. It helps me quite a lot. But be aware, it needs to not be in the next couple of seconds. It needs to be something that's going to be at least a minute or two away, because otherwise, by the time I see it in chat, the story may have gone past that point. So, a couple made up of a pug who's a farmer called Uwe and a squirrel who likes to ride him. No, that's not the storyline, before anyone gets really worried. Otherwise, as no one is putting anything in chat right now, on Friday we have the last of The Legend of Yig. On Saturday we have the complete version of The Legend of Yig. On Sunday we start The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So next week's going to be a bit different. Sunday and then every day through to Halloween is an episode of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, with it ending on Thursday. there'll still be a live stream on Thursday. Then Friday, there isn't going to be anything. The full-length version of Sleepy Hollow comes out on Saturday with another live stream and going back to normal from that point onwards. So because of Halloween, next week will be a little bit different. I posted, but some people may not have seen, I've stopped the vlogs purely because I think they're messing up the algorithm. They were getting far more hits than anything else, so they'll have been directing all of the traffic to people that want to see vlogs, rather than people that want to see horror stories. So they've stopped, and what I'll try and do is put that information in posts on the community page. It means that the numbers are going to be a bit funny for a few days for me, while hopefully everything settles out. But I'm hoping Sleepy Hollow next week can level that. I think that's all of those bits and pieces. I still want to wait the usual 10 minutes to give anyone else a chance to arrive before we hit the main story. Then these Thursday ones are going to aim to be 20-25 minute, and then I'm going to bring Sundays forwards to 6 o'clock so we can do hour and a half if my poor apology for a brain can keep up for that long. So this Sunday will be the first experiment on that. If someone sees me keel over with grey matter leaking out my ears, don't worry, there's not much left. I didn't even get a sarcastic comment from my wife on that one. Her comment was sarcastic comment inserted. I think she's a bit distracted. So, come on guys, anything besides anything about the couple and the house in the countryside that they've got? Or are we going to get started and then you're going to guide me when we take it from there? It's the one weird thing about doing this kind of format is I talk a lot. Now, most people will say this is not a surprise, but I'm then reliant on trying to wait and see if I ask a question, if anyone replies to it. So I think I've got a couple of ideas. Two minutes left. I do want to be able to give people that nice solid 10-minute start. I mean, there is a board gaming channel, a bit like Canje Studios, but slightly more prolific in their intros, called Rob's Gaming Table, and he's renowned for hour or 2 hour intros before he starts playing, or occasionally longer if chat really managed to take him off on a tangent. If you're interested in board games, go have a look. Both he and Canje have amazing channels. If you want to create your own stories, modern board games can be a good way to do that, looking at things like the Arkham Horror board games, the Arkham Horror living card game. Again, it creates a story as you go, and if you want to see it, either of those sites both have a good number, and you'll find Canje down in the chat for a link to his channel, or on the back of the majority of my videos, with the exception of the live ones. That said, the clock is just about to tick over, and as soon as that happens, I'll get onto it. And there we go. Uwe Fredriksson was a farmer. He and his wife had just bought a new house in the country. Their hope was they would do better than in their previous place. Previously, he'd had to go and sell up. He didn't have enough money. He couldn't feed his staff. So he'd closed up his farm, used most of the money he had to give to his staff so that they could start anew, and found a smaller place that he and his wife, Monica, were moving into, and were just going to run between the two of them. The house was old and run down. It had a decidedly gothic feel to it. In the middle of the land, there were acres round it, with nothing but the flat, sprawling fields of corn. Corn at the time of year that had raised high that you could walk through it and not be seen. Going out at night with nothing but an oil lamp to see by was scary. Hearing noises and rustling coming out, with the moonlight casting shadows through the corn, and bits and pieces moving, which could be people, could be ghosts. What was there, they didn't know. The house had that kind of feel to it. But now it was theirs. It was home, and they needed to make the best of it. They'd been in for a week or two. The going was hard because they still had farmland to keep while trying to renovate the house. At times it was as though the house was fighting them. They'd go through, they'd repair one thing and it would fall over and break again, or another would go. A pipe would break and there'd be water spurting all over the place. Rotten boards collapsed beneath them. It was a far larger job than either Uwe or his wife could cope with. Uwe, being a pragmatic sort, decided one day that he was going to send his wife away. She needed to go stay with his mother so that he could get the house back in order. Monica wasn't a fan of this idea, but she accepted. Waving from the door at dusk as she drove away, heading to the train station, Uwe was heartbroken, but he knew it was for the best. This house had a mind of his own, and the only way to get it under control was to fight it, and he didn't want to risk his beloved Monica while he did it. After she went, he went upstairs into the small bedroom they shared and curled up with heavy blankets, for there were few fires going, and went to sleep. His dreams were troubled. He was underground. There were weird creatures. He was walking through angles and over mist, walking on clouds, and colours were talking to him. He looked at the stars and they twinkled, one of them winking. He looked and there were creatures running around. He heard breathing behind him, turned, and a creature with 4 arms and huge fangs and eyes that bulged out on stalks was heading towards him. He turned, he ran, but in the way of dreams, he wasn't moving. He was stuck where he was. He screamed, but the scream came out silently. Trying to turn maybe another direction, he saw a field of corn and charged into it, pushing through the corn, hearing the tramping, the heavy breathing, and almost smelling the foul stench coming from the creature behind him. He pushed, running hard, and then there was a boom. He turned, stopped, The creature was paused. Looking over, he could see smoke coming out of a shotgun. Slowly, out from the corn, appeared a large figure. Big arms, a bulky chest, but what looked like a fluffy tail. And rather than a horse, he was mounted on some kind of squat, dog-like creature with a flat nose, drool, and long ears, with a slightly daft, quizzical look at his face, not seeming altogether sane. The creature turned and looked at the newcomer and smiled. The creature popped his shotgun, put in 2 more cartridges, clipped it back up as the monster started to run towards him. But Uwe was in the way. He raised the shotgun. The boom sounded, and everything went black. Uwe shot up in bed, covered in sweat, dripping down his head. It had been but a dream. Bad dreams were not unusual in this house, but previously he and Monica had been able to cuddle together to scare them off. But now it was just him. Realizing he'd get no sleep, he got up, splashed his face with cold water, dressed, and decided to head out and do more work. Today he was going to work on what was going to be the family room. But the floor was rotten. It needed to come up. Where the liquid was coming from, he didn't know. But that had to be fixed before they could continue with the house. He got a sledgehammer, he got a crowbar, and head downstairs. The advantage of being so remote, he could work at any time of day and not disturb anyone. The sun hadn't risen, though it wasn't far from dawn, and the hazy red was just starting to hit the sky, and the sun colouring from behind the horizon. He struck a match and lit an oil lamp, putting it to one side, probing out with his hammer to find the worst damaged of the various parts of the floor, bringing it down and smashing. There was a loud splintering, and again, as he destroyed the floorboards, trying where he could to leave the beams underneath them to support the replacement floor. It was hard work, and as the red glow of the sun started to seep through the window, casting shadows across the hole that he had smashed into the floor, he saw what appeared to be sections of block, circular. He unhooked his oil lamp and lowered it down, trying to get a better look, for the shadows were making it too dark to see. There was a circular stone construction, old and ancient, too old to be here, because when construction was done like this, the Americas had not been founded. But it looked like a well of some kind, old and ancient, with rough stones and missing parts. He looked down into the depths and could see nothing. He got a match, struck it, threw it, and it sunk, but flashed out before he could see what was happening. he found a bit of rock from under the floor and dropped it and counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. He continued and heard nothing. It was a long way down. But what was down there? Was there still water? Was this where the liquid was coming from? Was this the problem? Was this where the spirits were coming from? He did not know. He packed up his tools and went and changed. He got into the car. He knew in the nearby town there was a library, and the library had a historian by the name of Oscar Winthorpe. He'd searched out when trying to find some of the history of the area. He was there before the library opened and waiting as Oscar turned the key and allowed him in. Heading in, they conversed. Oscar got some maps and they looked at the area, finding out where his little property was. It was ancient land. Long ago, it had belonged, as everywhere had, to the natives, but this area was particularly sacred, but avoided. The tribe that had first been here had been wiped out long before the Americas were founded. But this only came from word of mouth, and the natives were loath to give any details. Nervously, they looked. There were talks and paintings of ancient spirits, of ancient creatures, and of things underground. There was one option. He had to go back, and he had to go down. He had to see what was under this well. Was the house safe? Oscar agreed to come with him. His curiosity was piqued, and he had some small amount of knowledge about mystical matters, conversing occasionally with a good friend at Miskatonic University. But packing up a few books today was not the time for long-distance letters to Professor Armitage. Today was a day for exploration. They gathered rope because they knew there was a long climb. Then they headed back, both acquiring pistols, old-style revolvers, to help them feel more secure. Somewhere in the back of Yui's mind was the idea of a shotgun, but each time it was there, he got shivers, remembering the smile on the face of the creature when he was shot. Heading in, they used some of the stronger floor beams to anchor their ropes and pushed one down the side. Next, they hooked a lantern and lowered it on a second rope, all the way down, until eventually, some hundreds of feet below, they saw it touch. They looked at each other nervously. That was a long way to climb. Carefully knotting the ropes and tying ropes together, they could now make sure they had the right extension to reach the bottom. The darkness between the two was deeper than the pits of hell or the voids of space, but they slowly climbed down, feet and arms, descending into the darkness. On the ground, there was a small amount of liquid, but largely rock. Picking up the oil lantern, Oscar producing an electric flashlight, they proceeded to look round what was a massive ancient cavern with paintings from prehistoric times on the walls of strange creatures and beings floating in the air, beings with just eyes or tentacles crawling out of the sea. There was something foreboding, dark and sinister about this place. But bravery was built into them both, and they decided to move on. They moved round, finding bones, some animal, some human, but all old, scattered round. They moved on, seeing a crevice and entering a set of passages. In the background, they could hear something like water rushing through, and they knew if the water level rose, they would be in great trouble. But they moved on. They smelt something almost smoke-like from another cabin. Turning down, the air got hazy. There was smoke, but again, there were colours entwined through it. But this was no dream. So, stepping through, they drew their pistols and looked in. There were creatures in there, and they were chomping. But the bones they were chomping on were not ancient. They were fresh, and they were human. The two froze in terror, having never seen anything like that. Uwe had some idea, for one of the creatures looked like the creatures in his dream, and he knew that they were in grave danger. They had to escape. Pausing, they drew their guns and started shooting. Oscar turned as the beasts turned towards them. He pulled out a book, read some words, and fire burst from his hands. A maniac gleam coming in there as he started cackling. He started chanting in a strange language, and the change on his face was terrifying to Uwe. His eyes sunk, and a gleam of pure insanity came over him as he gave in to the horrors of the powers he wielded. Uwe turned and ran, hearing pops, screams and whooshes behind him. But he knew he was not alone. He could hear behind him the heavy breathing of the creature, the scrabbling of its claws. Yes, Oscar may have held some, but the others were still coming. He vaguely heard a maniac, "Uwe, run!" and then started hearing the chant become more solid. Energy seemed to rush away from him, and a rumbling occurred behind. Uwe ran, dropping his lantern, casting it behind him, as he saw vaguely in the distance the lantern left hanging at the bottom of the well. The lantern exploded, sending flames up, catching the creature and casting fire in amongst his fur. But his fur was damp, and the fire didn't hold, and the oil soon burnt off, now filling the air with that horrid, putrid stench of burnt fur and animal flesh. Uwe ran on, knowing he had bought himself but little time. The rumbling came behind him, now starting with bursting and small explosions from where Oscar had been. He grabbed the rope as he reached it and started climbing. Frantically, looking up, he had a long way to go. Smoke had started coming through the passages and pouring up following him. He could hear the flicker of lights and the growing intensity of the explosions, along with the howls and growling of the creature following him. He felt the rope jerk and, briefly looking down, could see the creature, all 8 arms, starting to pull itself up the passage they had given it, out into the open world. Uwe could only think what horror would this cause if it made it out. These creatures now could get into the open, to the town. What when Monica returned? What had he done? What danger had he caused? Saying a silent prayer to whatever gods were listening, he climbed. Moving as fast as he could, he looked down and thought. Pulling a knife, he wrapped the rope round one hand and started soaring just beneath him. As quickly as he could, ping, a rope frayed, but the creature was still coming. Another one went. The rope was creaking. The rope he was holding was creaking, but still he cut and cut. And then, with a final groan and snap, just as the first set of claws grasped at his ankle, the rope broke. The creature's arm briefly caught, holding round the edge of his leg, its tall claws sinking in, drawing blood, but it could not hold its purchase, and raked his leg as it fell into the darkness. Looking down, holding tight, he saw the fury of flames building below and knew he did not have long to escape. Arm over arm, he pulled, blood dripping from his leg where it had been shredded by the creature. His strength waning, he saw the sun risen now, coming across the top of the well, and pulled himself up just as the rumble continued to expand below. He pulled just in time, rolling as a mighty explosion crested out through the well and in, pushing apart, destroying the fibres of the house and into the sky. The rumble slowed and stopped, and then gradually silence fell. But the silence did not last long, as there were groans and creaking and rumblings coming from the old well. Then, gradually, the stones started to topple as the well collapsed in on itself. Uwe lay for what seemed like hours, and then, realizing he was losing blood, wrapped his leg and pulled himself through. Getting to this car, he was woozy as he drove, vaguely seeing what appeared to be the town wobble in front of him, till it went black. Uwe awoke in hospital, his precious Monica beside him, his leg in pieces. The house was destroyed, but In the explosion, a small treasure of stones and gems had been found, but Uwe wasn't interested. He sold them straight without ever touching them. Farming was no longer for him. He had to know more about what those creatures were. He had to know more about what Oscar had sacrificed himself to prevent. He had a new path now. He knew the way he must go. Feeding farmhands was no longer his priority. How was that? 26 minutes, so about running to time. What did you all think? That's if you're still here. 41 views isn't bad though. Anyone? Oh well, as I can't see any replies, though that could just be YouTube. I hope you enjoyed the story. Some point tomorrow the bookmarking should go in. That will take out that beginning section. Oh, I got a reaction. Someone's seen it and liked it. Oh, lots of hearts. Thank you all. If you're there, feel free to type in chat. It gets very lonely in here otherwise, and you guys are my main form of a connection with the outside world. So, I hope you enjoyed the story of Uwe and Oscar. Enjoyed might not be the right word. There will be another story in a longer format, so probably multiple sections on Sunday. I haven't quite worked out how I'm going to handle that, but what I might do is, say, do 25 minutes, have a chat with chat, work out where we're taking it next, and then go back into the story for the next part. Again, everything will be bookmarked after the fact, so people can just jump to the story if they like. Maybe longer than 25 minutes. It will be however long it takes before my brain needs a break, basically. Because working that fast and creating on the fly, especially when there isn't any comment actually coming in as I go, is quite challenging. But I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you'll come to the next one. And I hope to see many of you in the premiere of the last part of The Legend of Yig. There is a playlist and you can go and find the earlier videos if you haven't seen them. It's at 8 o'clock British Standard Time tomorrow. I will be in chat. And if you want to wait to see the full-length version, that comes out at 5 o'clock British Standard Time on Saturday. And then there'll be another one of these at 6 o'clock, again British Standard Time, on Sunday. So, goodbye for now. And remember, be careful when you go searching in unknown caverns, for strange monsters and gods may abide there.